Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is the fourth in our series with Sustainable Minds and ever-widening. Transparency is the new green in product selection and specification. You all saw the invitation. This is our topic for today. We're going to talk about product transparency and how it's causing information anxiety. We're going to talk a little bit about what information anxiety is and the historical reference to that term and how it gave birth to the field of information architecture. And we're going to look at a little bit of history around Richard Saul Wurman to put the underpinnings in place about how design and information architecture has really transformed whole industries, if you will, in terms of making data understandable by putting it in a context and presenting it in a way that makes it accessible and useful. And ultimately, that is what informs all the work at Sustainable Minds and the partnership between Sustainable Minds and ever-widening. So a little bit of the history, for those of you who are followers and studiers of information architecture, Richard Wurman will not be a name that's unfamiliar to you. And he is an architect, practiced for many years, and early in the 60s, his passion really focused to turn to that of making information understandable. And his career kind of took off from there. He started a business called the Understanding business, and the access travel guides were one of the big industries that he tackled. Richard lives to understand things, and his idea for the access travel guides was to make travel understandable, because his experience was, you look at maps, you look at regular travel guides, they don't really make it understandable about how to go see a place. And so the access travel guides were all about making literally access to a destination understandable, meaningful, and really, really fun and desirable. He later went on to start the TED conferences, looking at the convergence of technology, entertainment, and design, to look at how design really was transforming technology and entertainment. And so TED had always been about the convergence of those three things. It has certainly taken on a life of its own, and he feels pretty proud about having started that conference. But I want to show you another example of another industry, financial reporting, that literally was transformed by the introduction of design. And Morningstar really became a transformative player in this space. And what I really like about their website and them as a company is not only were they founded on the insight that great design would actually make the data that they're trying to provide to a whole range of users, individual investors, financial planners, people doing retirement, a whole range of folks, knowing that design and information architecture, putting data in a context, would create a transformative business. And so they have their whole story on there. I love the fact they include the story about Paul Rand. They hired him to do the design. You were very fortunate to be able to hire Paul Rand back in the 90s as he was wrapping up his career. He was the one that introduced them not only to the great logo, but he actually introduced them to their first design director out of Yale, where Paul taught, who introduced investor-friendly forms, simplification of the display of data, the visualization of data. It used to be called information design. And what's really nice about their timeline is it shows in the early days, in the early 90s, three of the key elements on the timeline were information architecture and design innovations that transformed and really moved that company, Morningstar, through the market to become a really differentiated and really valuable brand and company. So I like to correlate the definition of, or the theory of architecture. So many of you who are on the call today are in fact architects, and you probably all learned about Vitruvius your freshman year, and the theory of architecture being commodity, firmness, and delight. Well, when I started my career, I'm Terry Swack, as you probably know, I was a graphic designer. And I got involved in designing for the internet in the early 90s, and I was trying to think about user experience and how to design successfully in this new domain. And so taking the Vitruvius complete theory of architecture, I adapted it for my own definition of user experience. And in 1994, I wrote a paper about this definition of user experience, that it's the combination of usefulness, usability, and desirability. So people aren't going to use a tool unless it's useful. That's the first threshold. Then they care about how usable is it, and what really makes it sing is the desirability, that feel of, wow, I love using this tool, or this really does what I want it to do, or I really feel empowered to get done what I need to do when I'm using this thing. So it's the combination of all three. And since we started working in the product transparency space on the building side beginning in 2013, and I'll show you a quick timeline, we again adapted this framework to apply to product transparency. And so to create successful product transparency experiences, it's first about findability. You've got to be able to find stuff first, but then it's equally about understanding the information that I've been able to find, and then being able to extract meaning from that information so that ultimately I really do feel informed and can make decisions that I feel confident about making. So I'd like to introduce Michael Heinsdorf from Avitru, who will tell you a little bit more about what we're going to cover today. Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Heinsdorf, and I am with Avitru, the developers of the American Institute of Architects MasterSpec Master Guide Specification System. Very happy that Terry Swack with Sustainable Minds invited us to help her out with this webinar. Although really I feel are just helping out a little bit, as this is really something Terry's been really interested about for as long as I've known her, and it's really interesting hearing her talk about it. What we're going to talk a little bit about today is the Sustainable Minds Transparency Catalog, which is a great resource that we've recently partnered up with to help architects and engineers find transparency data on products. Right now, we're just doing some very basic linking back and forth between MasterSpec and the Transparency Catalog, but in the future, we hope to get in a little bit deeper as we both work on the developments to the software capabilities of both platforms, so that we can really make transparency information a lot more easily accessible to architects and engineers. A couple things Terry will talk about today is how architects and engineers can use the catalog to both find data, but then also start talking to manufacturers if they're looking to open a dialogue about getting more sustainability information. And then she'll tell you a little bit about how manufacturers use the catalog, to do the reverse and communicate with architects and engineers. And then to end up a little bit, or as we get toward the end of the presentation, Terry's going to talk about how one manufacturer is working with the catalog, and how the catalog meets their goals for getting out sustainability information. And then we'll do a very brief Q&A. Terry, can you go to the next slide? I mentioned a little bit about Avitru. You formerly knew us as Arcom. We've been around for quite a while. In fact, MasterSpec has been around for quite a while. It's going to be 50 years old in 2019. So it's definitely something that's evolved to meet the needs of the architect and engineers. Avitru is the exclusive developer of MasterSpec, and we're one of the AIA's two strategic partners. We do all of the content development and software development in-house for the AIA. And I'm sorry, when I say for the AIA, that's for the AIA MasterSpec product. The AIA does have their own software team internally and works on some other projects there. MasterSpec is 917 specification sections right now with 6,000 plus products. And it's really the most widely used guide specification system in the United States. If you have any questions about MasterSpec, feel free to reach out to me anytime. And that's it about Avitru.
Thanks, Michael. Actually, I'd like to go back to the last bullet point on the Avitru slide. When Avitru rebranded, part of the rebranding was to be very clear about this commitment to construct a better world where better buildings lead to better lives. And that appealed to us at Sustainable Minds because Sustainable Minds is a mission-based company. I founded the company in 2007, and our mission is to operationalize environmental performance into mainstream product development and manufacturing for the purpose of driving revenue and growth through greener product innovation. So in the company, we have deep expertise in product transparency, technical studies, life cycle assessment, material ingredient analysis, deep expertise in customer experience, information design, and cloud software. And we are an ISO 14025 program operator. So we really do have deep expertise in all of the things that are required to be in this space. And our very first product, launched in 2009, was a streamlined eco-design and LCA tool for product development teams to be able to have a tool to use in early stage product development to evaluate the life cycle impacts of products, either in concept design or comparing new concepts to existing products, so comparing them to a benchmark, to be able to make better informed design decisions to bring higher performing greener products to market. So we see the design and the marketing of products as a continuous improvement loop, that when a manufacturer actually is making a product with better environmental performance, they have meaningful stories to tell about what they're actually doing to get that performance. And if they use those stories in the marketing process, then they're going to be able to create differentiation and preference in the market. And because they're doing full life cycle assessments as part of that disclosure, they can take that data and drive it back into product development to continue to look for ways to improve performance and to innovate and continue to evolve in the market. So this is our product transparency journey. When LEED version 4 was introduced in 2012, Sustainable Minds had already been in the life cycle assessment space for 4 years. We started the company in 2008, 2007, really, and had already been for a long time thinking about how to take life cycle assessment tools and life cycle assessment knowledge and simplify access to those knowledge and tools for product manufacturers to make better informed decisions across the organization. So when product transparency was introduced in LEED version 4 and environmental performance was going to be measured using life cycle assessment, and we looked into, okay, well, that's going to mean manufacturers are going to have to create product category rules, and they're going to have to do LCAs, and then they're going to have to create Type 3 environmental declarations. And we looked at those tools that were in the market at that time, and we said, this is never going to happen. It is too complex. It's too technical to be used in its current form for architects, engineers, and contractors to make informed decisions about products that go into a building. And so we said, this whole thing, it is absolutely the right thing to do to use standardized technical methods across all building categories, life cycle assessment and material ingredient screening and then interpretation. It is 100% the right thing to do to get everybody to be using the same technical tools to measure and screen and report the same way, but they've got to be made more standardized, more simplified, more understandable, and meaningful. And so you can see on our journey, every year we've been focused on working on one part or multiple parts of that problem of ultimately findability, understandability, and meaning. But we started with understandability and meaning. And our very first innovation was to create our own brand of Type 3 environmental disclosure, which we call a transparency report. EPD is a colloquialism. It's 3 pages. It's in the cloud, and it's everything somebody needs to know to make a purchase decision. We then became a program operator and created the very first 2-part PCR program for North America to make it more standardized and simplified for manufacturers to make product category rules, and then to create simplified reports that are 100% aligned with 14025, but don't require 40 pages of life cycle assessment data that nobody other than LCA experts understand. And each subsequent year, we worked on creating standardized reporting tools that display information in a visual way and provide for the manufacturer to include interpretation and storytelling and visualization about what they're actually doing to create those higher performing products. And finally, in 2016, we felt it was time to start working on findability. There were enough manufacturers by the end of 2016, 350 plus or minus a few, to be almost exact, who had invested in product transparency, either doing some number of EPDs or some kinds of material ingredient disclosure. And so that was when we launched the Transparency Catalog, really as a container for all those manufacturers to make their products with transparency disclosures findable. There was a big burst of activity in the product transparency space in 2017. I'll give you a little bit of a summary, I think in the next slide, that came out of our 2017 trend report. And so 2017 for us was now about, we've worked on understandability and meaning, we've simplified and standardized, and now we've made it possible for manufacturers, for their brands and their products to be found. And now this is what we've been working for from the beginning, is how do we make this information actionable? How do we deliver this information in a way that people can consume it, feel that they understand what it means, they understand what the manufacturer is doing, and then they can feel confident in making these selections about products. And so over the course of 2016, 2017, we worked with Knauf to build this infrastructure to build projects, configure products specific for a project, and allow AECs to save those products that are configured for projects in a project library and be able to share that content, those products and that knowledge with their team, with their clients, make it easy to gather up all the disclosure documentation for reporting, and ultimately for the manufacturers to be able to finally truly integrate product transparency into product marketing by making it easy for the AECs who care about selecting and specifying high-performance products to be able to find them, understand what the manufacturer is doing, select them, specify them, get specification help, and even for contractors, facility managers, people who make purchase decisions, be able to contact the manufacturer within the context of this tool to request a quote. Because at the end of the day, product transparency is just another set of criteria that belong in product marketing. And product marketing is done to ultimately result in product sales. And that's what we want to enable, is for AECs to find those high performance products, select them, specify them, and get them built into the built environment, so that what ends up happening is what we're all working for, is to get a built environment that has less impact on the natural environment and human health. And so that brings us to why the partnership with Avitru is so great, because for that to happen, to really make change in the world, it can't just be a fraction of people who care about green and who are super nerdy about data and disclosures. It has to be brought to the mainstream in ways that are simple and understandable and meaningful, so that people don't get subsumed with data, that they can actually just get information and make decisions. So, Michael, do you want to just touch a little bit about the lineup of things that we're doing?
Sure. So, I mean, what we're doing right now is there is a product that MasterSpec has called Product MasterSpec, where manufacturers basically take a MasterSpec section and customize it for their products, and we are linking that to Sustainable Minds product catalog pages. But what's really more interesting is what we're hoping to do down the future, which is basically integrate sustainability information from Sustainable Minds, which is one of the many catalog sources out there, into MasterSpec, so that a user who is searching, and I believe Terry used the term project criteria, and that's essentially what we look at, is when you're designing a project that has a certain criteria that you need to put within the project, say lead version 4, you would be able to automatically put in this criteria, and then it would sort the products and materials that meet those particular criteria, whether they be a lead credit or a credit for another sustainable design system. And those would be options that would be presented to you within MasterSpec. And then you'd have the ability to pull down data for other products to verify compliance. For instance, if you're looking for an environmental product declaration or cradle-to-cradle certificate or some other sort of documentation that you would need to put together while designing it, or that you would need as a resource while you're designing the project.
So in terms of bringing product transparency to the mainstream, just to wrap that up, this integration of content and tools means that people who use MasterSpec to find products and specify them will be able to find those high performance products and get them into the spec to end up really influencing spending decisions and built environment decisions. So diving deeper into our methodology and back into the findability, understandability, and meaning framework, we believe that product transparency does build credibly greener brands for manufacturers, but not just by producing disclosures. And I'm going to presume that everybody on this call understands that the presence of an EPD, for example, or the presence of an HPD, for example, does not mean that the environmental performance or material health of that product is better than something else. It's purely a disclosure. And so understanding what the manufacturer is actually doing and what that information means is pretty key if we're going to use disclosures to help make decisions. And so our point is that the value for manufacturers to be able to provide this information is to demonstrate they themselves understand what it means and that they're actually using it in the way that they make products. And then they're able to present the information in a consistent, understandable, and meaningful way. And when that happens, that's what really good marketing is. That's telling the truth. Truth builds powerful brands, and powerful brands create preference and value for their companies. The reason I go to this length to explain what good marketing is that people tend not to like the word marketing because it is so tainted with it's tainted. People think, oh, marketing's bad, but actually, good marketing is what we want because it's telling meaningful stories that help us make better informed decisions. So all that to say, the transparency catalog has been designed to address these challenges that both AECs and manufacturers have in finding products with transparency information, understanding what that information means and how to use that information to achieve credits in the various rating systems, and ultimately to derive meaning from that information. So the transparency catalog is an educational, marketing, and customer service solution. We don't call it a product database. We get put in that product database category, and yes, there's a product database that sits behind the user interface and the user experience, but we don't perceive this solution as, and I'm using air quotes, a product database. So what's differentiated about it? It has one meta filter, which is it's only the brands who've invested in product transparency disclosures, and it's only those products with transparency information. We believe that because in LEED version 4, they really raised the bar on how performance, environmental, and material health gets measured. All of the manufacturers who have invested in product transparency have already invested in the single attribute certifications and ratings for each of those product categories, which is why they've moved on to do the next thing. So part of designing things that are simple, and again, most of you who are on the call are designers, you know how hard it is to design something that's simple because you spend as much time deciding what not to put in as what to put in. And so we made that decision. This is only about product transparency information and ultimately making brands and products findable, understandable, and that information meaningful. So all the stuff to convey that is built in. It has to be there because people have to be able to learn while they do. So we don't sell sponsored content. We don't sell ads. All of the content about the manufacturer's products are built into the tools, the standardized tools that we develop and they ultimately utilize. We are always striving to deliver the best user experience. It's always free to use. We haven't talked about that. And our business model is also very transparent. And we're going to talk about business models a little bit later. There are no right or wrong business models. It's just how a company decides this is how we're going to make money. Sustainable Minds business model is an annual subscription. It's software as a service, so it's just like Autodesk and all the other cloud software solutions. The user pays an annual subscription and you get tools and services and whatever you get for it. We don't monetize data. We don't collect user information, and therefore, because we don't collect it, it doesn't get sold to manufacturers or anyone else. You'll see we allow manufacturers to get their own analytics on their information by using Google Analytics. It's a handy tool to build right in. So they can see the kind of traction they're getting, page views, what people are clicking on, but They have access to that information themselves. That isn't something that we manage, and therefore it's not part of our business model. We have nothing to sell on that front. So our focus is on brands, and that in and of itself is pretty unique. And the reason that we focus on brands is because if you think about the scenario where you start working on a project and you're looking for products, traditional scenarios bear out that we all go think about the brands we like, and we go to those websites first to look for, in this case, hey, I want to look for XYZ company's products. Let's see if they have any with transparency information, because I like that brand. I like their design. I like their, whatever it is that you like about it. And so the catalog is designed so that all the brands who have invested in product transparency are showcased right there on the front page, that you don't have to come to the front page and execute a search to figure out who's there, how much stuff is there. We wanted the user experience to be like, see everything in a glance, make it simple, don't make it hard. And again, it's not only designed for AECs to be able to find brands and products, understand what they mean, those disclosures mean, and how to use them in the rating systems, learn what a manufacturer is doing. It's really this virtuous cycle of supply and demand, that there has to be the capability for people to share feedback with manufacturers, ultimately reward those manufacturers and let them know that you have selected their products. I'm going to show you what we've done to enable that. But it's just as much about enabling manufacturers, the people in their organizations and their distributors and partners, to understand what that manufacturer is doing in terms of making higher performance products, what they themselves need to understand, how to use the disclosures, what they mean. And so manufacturers are spending a lot of time and effort and dollars to get their own organization up to speed to be able to effectively interface with the AEC community and represent their products in a knowledgeable and meaningful way. So, when all of this happens, when manufacturers really have their organizations humming and building professionals are able to select products knowledgeably and provide that feedback, we have a working virtuous cycle that will create the change that we're all looking for in the market. So I'm going to talk about the transparency catalog's information architecture. These are just 2 bullet points because it's something I want to make sure that we point out. The functionality is simple, but the action is important, and it's becoming more so now as we've had this burst of product transparency activity in 2017. Many manufacturers, now close to 1,000 manufacturers and industry groups, have produced transparency disclosures. Just the disclosures themselves are really not much longer the differentiator. And, it's been challenging, it's been expensive for manufacturers to invest. And now they're really looking for that loop to close. They need to see that the industry is acknowledging that they've responded to this request for transparency, and they need to be rewarded for that. So, when I talked about information anxiety and putting data in a context, it really is about first understanding the big picture of this space that we're talking about. So I'm going to start with this driver of product transparency, which is the credits offered by the green building rating systems for environmental performance disclosures and for material ingredient disclosures. So there are 5 green building rating systems that offer credits for one or both. But the point here is that you guys aren't looking for disclosures, you're looking for products that have disclosures. So we ask manufacturers, have you made it easy when people come to your website to find your products with transparency information? And if they can find them, what do they learn about what you're doing to make those higher performing products? What will they learn when they find those disclosures? So the way we compile the transparency catalog is that we, using people with knowledge about this space, monitor all of the rating systems, the green building rating systems, all of the credit language that's continually being created and updated. And we monitor all of the program operators and all of the material ingredient disclosure programs or rating systems, and multiple times a month update the catalog with new brands that have invested in product transparency, so that all of the brands who have done something are findable in the catalog. So this is what happened in 2017. This is out of our 2017 trend report. The data creation time period was January 1 to December 31st. And it turns out that now of 34 active CSI master format divisions, some type of transparency disclosure was created in 24 of them, some much more active than others. There's obviously reasons for that. But in total, there's been pretty close to 9,600 something disclosures created. And as you can see, I'd mentioned this before, when we launched the catalog, there were 350 brands. By the end of December 2017, there were 961. And we not only added all of the new manufacturers who produced product-specific EPDs and material ingredient disclosures, we also added all of the manufacturers and industry organizations who participated in creating industry-wide EPDs. And that's super important because, well, actually for a whole lot of reasons, but one reason is many manufacturers simply don't have the time, the money, the technical knowledge to be able to do their own product-specific EPDs. The industry groups that have stepped up to make those industry-wide EPDs happen have made it possible for smaller manufacturers to be able to have products with transparency information. And that's a whole other webinar about industry-wide EPDs. We'll be doing that in a few months, but nonetheless, huge growth in disclosures. And so we can count all that stuff. We can count the manufacturers, we can count the number of disclosures, but what we can't count is the number of products that the disclosures represent. We know at least there is a one-to-one correlation of products to disclosures, right? So we know that there's going to be at least 9,600 and something products with transparency information, but we also know that a disclosure can represent 10, 50, 100, sometimes even thousands of products. We supported a manufacturer to create HPDs. Each one represented over 1,200 products. So the challenge, and particularly the way the credits are structured to get your 20 permanently installed products, you actually have to know all the products that really do have disclosures associated with them. And again, this is for the trend report. We were trying to gauge, how many products were available, and trying to kind of dispel the thought that there weren't enough products with disclosures in response to product transparency. So we kind of did a comparison to the manufacturers and the products and suites, but because the number of products with disclosures isn't really countable, we did a kind of back of envelope calculation and said, again, we know there's a one-to-one correlation, but let's say it averaged it out to be 100 per, even though we know that's probably not true, but throwing out the high end of thousands and the low end of one, what's probably true is that there's somewhere in the middle between roughly 10,000 and 1 million products. So whatever that number is, it's a pretty significant number of products with transparency information. But it's really difficult for manufacturers to be able to correlate all of those disclosures, to correlate the disclosure with all of the products that it covers. And so this was a problem that Sustainable Minds understood right at when we started thinking about findability and the design of the catalog, that we had to provide for this correlation of disclosures to products so that all of the products that a manufacturer offers could be found. And so this is a close-up of one of the standard listing pages in the catalog. The heart of the listing page is this table that is organized by environmental performance disclosures and material ingredient disclosures in the vertical. And then the horizontal is the CSI Master Format Division with the manufacturer's brand name for products in that division appended to it so that you, when you're using this, understand what they call their products in that division. And then within each of those divisions, you can now find all of the products that they have correlated to each of the disclosures that is available for it. And you can see it all in one place. So when I show you this quick demo live, you can look at all the products that they have all in a glance. There's several hundred products on this page. Our biggest listing, Tarkett, has over 800 products in one page across all of their brands. So literally, you can find every product they have with transparency information, get to the disclosures, understand what they mean, see that they're valid, all in one place. But even more importantly, remember I was speaking earlier about manufacturers expect people to come to their websites when they're doing research about products. That's why they have websites. And so again, in the information architecture for the transparency catalog, and with one of our top goals to be simple, being simple means we're not going to duplicate most of the information a manufacturer has on their website. That's why they have websites. So the design of the catalog is such that we want to say no matter where people go to find products, whether it's the manufacturer's website or it's the transparency catalog, they're going to end up back on the product page of the manufacturer's website. So when I go back here, if I click on any of these product links, it takes me to the product page in the manufacturer's website. So what it does is it really does double duty. It sends people to the manufacturer's website, which is where they want people to go, but it helps folks find all their products with transparency information. And there's not a lot of content to be managed in the catalog, either for the manufacturer or for the Sustainable Minds team. So I showed you our roadmap of kind of our research topics or the problems that we kind of worked on year over year to get to where we are. So we share with you in 2018, this is what we're working on. So for manufacturers, we're working on these challenges that they're facing. Is it easy to find all your company's products with transparency information? They spend a lot of time educating sales reps and responding to requests. And can their reps help get products into the spec? I want to show you the research objectives that we're working on for you. And I'm kind of giving away the end of the webinar. You are going to get this same set of questions. So it's how we actually do research and get some data to inform our research along the way. And so here's what we are looking to learn. We like to find out if people have seen the catalog before they come to a webinar and if they think it's useful. After we do the webinar, we like to see if we've influenced anybody to change their mind. So that's, we like to see that happens. But here's the real heart of the research we asked the question, from your own experience, what's your greatest challenge to selecting or specifying products with transparency information? And you're going to get a list of potential answers. The important thing about this question and this set of answers is that many people believe that the biggest impediment to specifying products with transparency information today is findability. I can't find the products with transparency information. But in fact, we've collected data on this question now since January and probably have several hundred data points of answers. It is equal is I can't find products to I can't understand how to use the disclosures to make decisions. So it isn't just findability that's a challenge to specifying products with transparency information. It is equally not being able to understand what they mean. And so that is a super important challenge to still be working on. And it's going to take a pretty long time to continue to work that out. The next is just trying to find out how manufacturers get feedback, if they get any, and what do they get. So we asked, when all things were equal, have you ever selected a product over another because it had transparency information? And the answers range from, yes, and I let the manufacturer know. No, not yet. No, I did, but I didn't let them know. Or, not yet. Other criteria took precedent. And then the final question is, do you tell manufacturers how you use the transparency information to make decisions? And the most telling answer is that some architecture and design firms do have guidance that they provide manufacturers. You must provide us XYZ to consider selecting your products, but they don't tell. What it shows here is that there's not a lot of telling the manufacturer about how that information gets used to make decisions. And that's going to be really important going forward because that is going to be a demonstration of how understandable and meaningful has the information become. And now AECs will have become knowledgeable enough to make informed decisions and be able to choose those high-performing products or the highest performing products and be able to talk about environmental performance and material health as performance criteria that are driving product selection. So just to give you a quick overview of the reporting tools in the catalog, this is the standard listing. I showed you part of it. It's super simple. The manufacturer can have an opening statement, talk about who they are. There's a contact link. You can contact them right there. You can see all of their products. You can learn more about what they're doing. This is kind of free text. You can learn about the other certifications and ratings that they have invested in, and I invite you to certainly browse the catalog and all the brands. You can see how each of them are a little bit different. What you can't see in the page is that the manufacturer has their own Google Analytics on the page, so they can see, if you ever looked at Google Analytics, what it tells you is how much traffic is coming to the page, what they're clicking on, where they're coming from. You can, do a lot of fancy stuff with the data, but none of it is about knowing who those users are. And Google Analytics is pretty ubiquitous, used on most websites. It doesn't interfere with the user experience. And finally, we have these social media tools that are pretty powerful, and you can use them too because they're not. There's no login to the catalog. Anybody can use it. There's no login. Because there's no login, we're not tracking anybody's usage. And you can quickly email links to this page to your team. You can tweet about it. it makes communication back and forth super simple. But recently we added this link just based on the research that we're doing, and it's a simple thing. It's not complicated. So every listing has the contact link. Most listings also have a phone number. But we added this last paragraph. Let us know when you select or specify any of these products. Anything you can share about when and why helps us help you achieve our collective product transparency goals. This link, more frequently than not, now goes to an actual person. This link often goes to a contact form. Not always, not in all the listings. Sometimes it goes to the same person. Sometimes it goes to a form. But we're really advocating with the manufacturers, make this an email to a person so that it's this personal communication of you to a person telling them, yes, I did select your products. They did get specified. Here's what I liked about it. That is the surest way to ensure that manufacturers will keep doing this. If they don't get that feedback and the sales don't show, they're just not going to do it anymore. And then we will have not been as successful as we could be with what product transparency is trying to drive. You can see that we've added this cross-linking and co-branding. So if you go to get GAF's MasterSpecs on the product MasterSpec, go to get their product MasterSpecs on their free specification page, you can come over here and find all their products with transparency information and vice versa. As Michael mentioned, we're also working together on helping manufacturers get their product MasterSpec language updated to include their transparency activity so that when their products do get selected and specified, it will be more difficult for the contractor or someone else to select something comparable if it doesn't have the same level of transparency information. And then the next set of tools, so what I just showed you was the standard listing. The next set of tools are the tools that are utilized in the featured brand position, and we call those our transparency products. They're actually transparency marketing tools that integrate product transparency into product marketing. And now the manufacturer has the ability to tell those stories and make the technical information understandable and meaningful. And you'll find these featured brands have brand showrooms. These are our standardized transparency products, our transparency report, that's our 3-page Type 3 environmental declaration, the material health overview that standardizes the material ingredient disclosures from any program and provides the opportunity to interpret and explain what those disclosures, those material ingredient disclosures mean, what's in the product and why, what the manufacturer is doing to improve. And the performance fact sheet combines all of those stories and links to all of the disclosures and the results that they have. And each of these reporting tools include the value in the rating systems and all of the rating systems that we track that you can earn by specifying those products. And this is just a tiny, tiny little sneak preview to let you know that we will be adding filtering in the coming quarter. The focus will still be on brands, but you will be able to filter by CSI master format and rating systems and keywords. And that's going to be a pretty interesting user experience. This is all ultimately in service. Our vision of success is that, in 5 years, all the brands in the catalog all have showrooms, all are using transparency products, all have configurators and builders so that you can save all of your projects in one place and communicate with manufacturers. This is one of the folks who worked on designing the builder with Knopf and us to talk about as the director of sustainability in a large firm, you have to be able to learn while you do. And so integrating the information both about product transparency and now making it understandable how to actually specify products, because the specification process is definitely moving upstream. More people are involved in that. Again, being able to integrate all of that in one place is quite necessary and powerful. So we're going to just wrap up. We say to manufacturers, you have choices about how you market your product. You go to trade shows, you have reps, you buy advertising. There are product databases, there are program operators, and we always get asked, Sustainable Minds, how are you different or the same from other providers that seem similar to what you're doing? So we've just developed, like anything else, an architecture or a framework for decision making for manufacturers to be able to choose the solutions. But it's also the same for you. How do you choose the tools that you use to get a job done? And like anything else, people choose tools based on what they believe about the brand and ultimately the user experience, usefulness, usability, and desirability. And in this space, findability, understandability, and meaning. So I just want to focus in for a second on business model, because if you understand how a company makes money, then you can understand how their product development happens, because they're going to build, we are going to build tools and deliverables into our solutions that make our business models successful. I already mentioned that ours is an annual subscription, but I'm going to have Michael just jump in for 1 second, because the fact that we have the same business model, Sustainable Minds and Avitru, was critically important, as it means we are on the same page philosophically, and both philosophically and also our business models match, so that we can integrate our products, and that's not hard to do. Michael, do you want to talk about this blog post that Jim wrote a few weeks ago?
Yeah, sure, Terry. One thing that we've always been pretty aggressive about at MasterSpec is actually protecting our clients' data. And when we say clients, that's really the architects and engineers who use MasterSpec. The AIA is quite protective about any of the data that comes out of MasterSpec use and recognize that fairly early on. Arcom was very protective about it, and in our most recent incarnation as Avitru, we are also remaining very protective about that data. We had actually made this decision well before the whole Facebook fiasco of a month or two ago, and that kind of, in our minds, really only solidified the position that we had taken at that point, that we should go ahead and safeguard the information of our customers, because that really is, that trust that we have as MasterSpec, that's really one of the few things that we have as a tool that architects and engineers use, that no one else really has. I mean, let's face it, you can go to many other places for content, you can find product data from multiple manufacturers, multiple different catalog sites. But when it comes to protecting the trust of being a trusted resource, of making sure that we're putting the effort in that we have to go ahead and make sure that you're getting objective data that's not research that just happens to be sponsored by a company that has an interest in it. We've gone down that road of making sure that we're going to go ahead and keep to those tenets. And generally we like the people that we work with to feel the same way about that. We had never really taken a stance on this position before. Like I said, we had made the decision to do so before the whole Facebook thing happened. But we're not necessarily what we do. We're trying not to make it buried legalese like it has been for many products over the years.
So when we talk to manufacturers, we give them that framework and say, look, go through and think about, like you would in making any other decision in your marketing plan, look at the solutions that are in the marketplace and use those criteria to evaluate which solutions are going to be right for you. But if you start with business model, it makes a lot of sense in terms of what is actually getting built. And so here's an example of how somebody might do a spreadsheet. I put in the business models of the Transparency Catalog, UL, and Giga. Note that both UL and Giga require login at different points, and they require that you set up accounts, and they collect information about you when you set up your account. That's a really important signal about their business model in terms of if they're collecting that data, then it's an asset. They're going to use it in some way. Like I said, all of these business models are valid business models. They're just a choice of how a business decides to make money. We're just reinforcing together Avitru and the Transparency Catalog. The way we make money, our business model is we charge annual subscriptions. We don't monetize data. And with that, we're come to the end of our time together. We appreciate you hanging out till the end. We are committed to reducing information anxiety in product transparency, and we invite you to use the catalog, use MasterSpec and all of its tools, and we are committed to making it easier for architects, engineers, and contractors to find, understand, select, and specify products to construct higher-performing, greener, and healthier buildings all in one place. So thank you. Thank you, Michael. And we'll be back in the coming months with more educational content.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, all.